Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back. Cool. So, listening to our language. This was a massive paradigm shift that I had. During the summer, my first summer selling, I read this book near the end of the summer. So in like late July, early August, I read it. At least this chapter, and this section here, like, resonated with me a ton. It was something that I was enamored with, because it was such a major paradigm shift of not only the world and other people, but mainly like myself. Like, I mainly gained this super big paradigm shift into like who I am, which is really cool. And I kind of want to go into that because it reaffirmed the fact that I have power, that I can do things, that I'm not dependent on other people, that I am an interdependent being who is choosing to be in interdependent relationships. So that's like what's like really cool about this section here. Is our language actually tends to give away our self paradigm. The way that we talk and describe things, situations, other people, even ourselves, will in effect give away our paradigm, or the basic nature of our underlying maps, is the phrase that Stephen Covey uses, which essentially just means that we can get an insight into our lenses through which we're looking through. Our maps, which describe our territory, which aren't perfect, we can describe those by just listening to our language. So, for example, right? Let's say that I got a call from a buddy, and he says, "Hey, dude, look, like, we're gonna go hop in the river today." And I said, "Oh, sorry, dude, I can't go. I have homework." Right? In effect, I am empowering my homework to control me. I am empowering whatever that thing is to control me, so I don't go hop in the river. But that's actually not the case. I actually could go hop in the river. I might take an F on an assignment, but what's like the natural consequence, right? And we're kind of gonna go about that later. But our language is but then so that would indicate that I see myself as a reactive person. That I don't see myself as empowered or as responsible, able to respond, where I can choose differently, right? So essentially, what we're going at here is that our language is a very real indicator of the degree to which we see ourselves as proactive people. So the language of reactive people absolves them of responsibility. In essence, they're saying, I am not responsible. I cannot respond to any sort of stimulus that happens, whether that be persons, even like feelings and emotions, words, opinions of other people, events that happen. Like, I can't choose to respond. It just is how it is. And so our language can give us a super big insight into how reactive or proactive we are, which is very, very insightful for us to dive into that, because so many of these reactive phrases we use all the time. It's ridiculous. And so, like, some of this reactive language is saying, like, that's me. That's just the way I am. Or, he makes me so mad. Essentially, like, how often do we use that line? Oh, it makes me so mad. Right? It's so frustrating to me. It's like it makes me so frustrated, you know. And so with that, essentially, even like I cringe even like saying that. But essentially, what it's saying is, like, I'm empowering my feelings to control me. I'm empowering the weaknesses of that person to control my life. Right? Like, it's unreal. I cannot choose to respond to that person. a very real example of this is like on the doors, when someone gives you an objection, the best thing to do is to like actually get more excited. Like the more objections they give you, the more excited you should be, which is not how they expect you to react. But like the more objections they give you, the more that you should like smile, the more that you should like be like more engaged in the conversation and like wanting to know more information. Because what that essentially shows is you're being proactive. You're saying, I don't actually care what you say. It doesn't matter to me. I just choose my response, and I choose to be pumped by the fact that you're like even engaging with me and that you're giving me feedback and information. Because as you talk, I can then understand where you're coming from, your own self paradigm. Really cool stuff there. Or something like, I can't do that. I just don't have the time. So like time is controlling me. In essence, a proactive person will schedule priorities, not time. Right? And so it actually just depends on your priorities. For example, let's say that your basement floods, right? And you have a super busy week and you have no time to take care of your basement. Guess what? Something's going to get moved. You're going to take care of your basement. It is going to happen. And so it's just scheduling priorities, not scheduling time, right? This one's good too. The if only phrases. If only my wife were more patient. If only my coworker worked more or worked harder, right? It's like someone else's behavior is limiting my effectiveness. I just realized my mic wasn't very close to me and I have it plugged in. So hopefully that's better. Hopefully you guys can hear me a little bit better now. Sorry about that. Okay, so there's that. This one's so good. I have to do it. How many times do we say that in our day-to-day life? I have to. Yeah, I have to go to work. I have to do homework. I have to go to this event. Like, no, just say I'm going to this event, or I choose to go to this event. Like, you don't have to do anything. Stephen Covey tells a story about one time he's in class teaching, and a student gets up to leave the class, and he says, "Hey, like, will you excuse me from class? I have a tennis trip, or sorry, I have to go on a tennis trip." And Stephen Covey responds saying, "Wait, you have to go, or you choose to go?" And he's saying, "No, I really have to." And he asks him, "Well, what will happen if you don't go?" And the student says, "Well, why, they'll kick me off the team." And how would you like that? Consequence. Again, that word consequence. And the student's like, "Well, like, I wouldn't like that consequence. That would suck. Like, I want to play tennis." And so Stephen Covey says, "So essentially what you're saying is you choose to skip my class and go on the tennis team so that you can play. Well, what will happen if you miss my class?" And the student goes, I don't know. Well, like, think hard. Like, what would be the natural consequence of you missing my class? Now, here's where it gets cool, where he differentiates between natural consequences and social consequences. So the student responds, says, "You wouldn't kick me out, would you?" Again, he has this paradigm of reference from the tennis team that they would kick him out, right? But Stephen Covey says, no, that would be a social consequence. Which brings us back to the social mirror. Getting kicked out of class or out of an organization is a social consequence. It's like something that like other people do to us, right? That they happen to us. Whereas a natural consequence, finally the student says, "Well, I just wouldn't learn anything. Like, I wouldn't learn what you were teaching." That's the natural consequence. Is that I wouldn't gain that additional knowledge or that additional insight. Like, for example, if you're hanging out with friends and then you all of a sudden, quote unquote, have to go do homework, you would miss out. Well, there are two natural consequences. One is you don't build the right relationships with your friends. And the other is that if you don't do homework, then you're not going to learn that material, or you might get an F on your grade. And so like opportunity cost, right? Like which one did you choose to do? And every day we subconsciously or even consciously make these decisions. And so a lot of these reactive languages are like phrases like these. There's nothing I can do. That's just the way I am. He makes me so mad. They won't allow that. I have to do that. I can't. That's a big one too. I can't. How many times do we say, I can't go? I can't do this? So often. But it's just an indicator of the degree to which we see ourselves as proactive people or as reactive people, right? Going on, I must, if only. Those are all reactive language. Now, proactive language says this. Let's look at our alternatives. I can choose a different approach. I control my own feelings. I can create an effective presentation. That's freaking gold. That is amazing. For example, my buddy, we went to Krispy Kreme. We do this like rejection therapy thing where we ask for something crazy and we like want to get rejected. That like you win if you get rejected. And so my roommate goes up to the the teller and goes, or the cashier, and goes, hey dude, like, can I get 5 donuts, but I want them in the Olympic ring, like, symbol. So 5 donuts, but like they're cut up and they each have like the colors of the Olympic rings. And the guy goes, we don't do that. And so my roommate just like kept talking with him, kept creating an effective presentation, kept like overcoming his objections, like walking him through it, like, but like, could you do it? Like, is it possible, you know? And essentially like this conversation went on for like 30 minutes. Until finally they like made it happen and he got his 5 Olympic donut rings. And so it was pretty funny actually, but how many times he went through these objections and like just creating an effective presentation, just stayed there, was persistent, had the desire and the faith to be able to do that, and it happened. Because he chose to create an effective presentation. So whereas the cashier was saying, we can't do that, it's like not possible, my roommate showed him, said like, no, like this, like, we can make this happen. Like, let's be proactive and assume and like take responsibility for it. Like super cool there. And so what ends up happening is a lot of times with reactive people, reactive language becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. The very fact that we say, I can't or I have to, reinforces our belief that we're reactive. It reinforces and gives our brain evidence that we actually are determined. All of that reactive language comes from a paradigm of determinism, a fixed mindset, not of a growth mindset, of an ability to change or ability to respond, right? And so as we blame outside forces, other people, circumstances, even like the stars, we feel increasingly like victimized and like out of control. Like things aren't actually in our ability to influence or like put effect on. One like huge principle of this is that actually happened in my own life is the principle of love, right? So in like marriages or in relationships, love is actually a verb, not a feeling. Proactive people view love as a verb, and then the fruit of that proactive actions and sacrifice is actually the feeling, which is love as well. So it's the same word, but there are 2 different implications of it. One a verb, which is proactive, and then one feelings, which is reactive, right? And so depending on which one you focus on is the one that will indicate what your paradigm is of how proactive you are as a human being. So essentially, Cubby tells a story about where he was at a seminar and this man comes up to him and he says, Cubby, my wife and I, I'm really worried. He says, I don't like my wife and I have a bad relationship. It's like falling apart. It's deteriorating. We have 3 children to worry about, and I'm like really concerned about what's gonna happen. We just don't love each other anymore. Again, those words, we just don't, or I guess I don't love her anymore and she doesn't love me. Like, what should we do? Like, that kind of language, right? I guess we just don't. It just is how it is. Very, very reactive. So he kind of like walks him through it and says, like, the feeling isn't there anymore. And he says, yeah, it's not there. And he said, okay, then love her. And the guy is like, no, I told you, like, I don't love her. Like, the feeling just isn't there anymore. And he goes, love her. Like, Cubby, you don't understand. The feeling of love isn't there anymore. And he says, then love her. If the feeling of love isn't there, that's a very good reason to love her. He said, my friend, love is a verb, right? It's the sacrifices that you make. It's the empathy. It's the time you give to that person. It is the ability to listen and to understand, to give that person psychological air, to emphasize, to appreciate them, to affirm her or them as a person, right? And so, like, he differentiates his fact that the root of the feeling of, so there's the root and then there's the fruit, right? The root is this proactive love of action, of listening, affirming, appreciating, whereas the fruit, the feeling of love is, like the fruit, which happened to me in one of my relationships. I definitely got caught up in this feeling of love after about 3 months of dating this girl. I just, like, for some reason just didn't, like, wasn't proactive about, like, anything. And I actually feel, like, really, like, kind of embarrassed by it and, like, really bad about how I feel. However, I do acknowledge that and I choose to move on and respond in different ways now. But it was, like, a really, like, powerful lesson to me that a proactive love is way better than a reactive love, and that it's very, very crucial to all sorts of relationships. And that also goes into, like, not just individual people, but, like, societies in general, like cultures, entire organizations. If people view love as, like, as a society, if people view love as a proactive version, they're going to progress and to prosper. But as soon as they shift that focus to a feeling of love, all of a sudden, like, things start going downhill because people start becoming reactive. So one thing that, like, Covey talks about that's actually really fascinating is the idea of the Hollywood script. All the movies that we watch, they all portray love as this reactive feeling. Like, oh, you meet someone and then you just fall in love with them and live happily ever after without having to work for it, without having to, like, put in the hard work to build that relationship. I'm reading one of Covey's other books right now called Spiritual Roots of Human Relationships, which is bomb. It's amazing. And I think I'm going to do a podcast on that next because it's so deep and I want to understand that one too. But anyways, he explains this idea of building a relationship and how so many times when we want the joy and the fruit and the meaning and the satisfaction and the passion from a relationship, we oftentimes take shortcuts to try and get there. We want it as fast as we can with the least amount of work. And he says, oftentimes the nature of that relationship is as shallow and as hollow as the methods through which we used to get it. Let me repeat that. Oftentimes, the nature of that relationship is as shallow and as hollow as the methods through which we used to get it. The law of the harvest, we reap what we sow, right? If we are very proactive and love people, then we will feel that fruit. We just will. Whereas if we're reactive about it, then we won't. And that's just how it is. That's just natural law, natural consequence. It's like giving of self, you know? Like, heck, my best friend just had I've known him since kindergarten. He had a baby yesterday. So him and his wife, right? It's like this nature of love where they spent 9 months of, like, pain and then, like, a couple hours of really, really big pain to bring forth this newborn child into the world. Like, the amount of love and the amount of, like, proactive love that action takes is remarkable, and that's what increases that relationship between parents and child, especially the mother, right? So that's, like, a really cool idea how, again, going back to this idea of proactive people subordinate feelings to values. So if you don't feel love, it's kind of actually hard to sacrifice for someone or to listen to them or to appreciate them or to affirm them. But that's where proactivity comes in. It's his ability to respond. It's like if you don't feel like doing it, like do it more often, not less often. Like, like choose to respond in a different way. If you don't have that feeling of love anymore, it's going to be really, really hard to affirm them, to appreciate them, to listen to them. But that's the only way to recapture that feeling of love of the fruit. And it's going to be kind of awkward and kind of weird at first, but that's what, like with everything, with playing the piano, with learning how to play pickleball, or even like learning how to read as a kid. Like it's all super awkward and weird at first, but the freedom that comes from it afterwards is marvelous and spectacular. So guys, that's it for this episode. Next episode, we have the circle of concern versus circle of influence. Let's go. I'm super pumped about that. Thank you guys for hopping on this, and look at your language and examine it, because it may reveal to you how much you see yourself as a proactive person or as a reactive person. So keep that in mind, guys. Love you all. See ya.